Welcome back to the Kaiser Report. Time now to go back to Ontario, Canada, and talk with Henry Giroux. He's of McMaster University, of course. He's the professor of scholarship in the public interest and author of Neoliberalism's War on Higher Education, and also Zombie Politics and the Culture in the Age of Casino Capitalism. Henry, welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Max.
All right, you've got a new book you're working on. I believe there's something on Trump. Can you talk a little bit about it, sir?
Yes, of course. I mean, the book is called America at War with Itself, and it's going to be published by City Lights in September. One of the things in the book that I was very concerned about is the rise of what I call a new kind of authoritarianism in the United States. One that doesn't exactly mimic the neo-fascism or the fascism of the 20s and the 30s, but has its own distinct kind of flavoring that's uniquely American. And we can go to a whole range of places. The way money now drives politics, the way the massive inequality, seems to shape of almost every aspect of domestic policy, the rise of domestic terrorism in the United States, the militarization of the police, paramilitarization, the militarization of society in general. So what I've tried to do in the book is put together a whole range of issues that, in a sense, don't just focus on Trump, but focus on the conditions that helped to create him.
Fascinating stuff. The snow globe of Americana has produced a bit of a Godzilla in there that's knocking things over. Let's remind folks that your work up there at the university is primarily focused on education, correct? And theories of education. And, you know, this would seem like a good time for people maybe to get educated. How come education as something that is pursued to be well educated seems like the last thing anyone wants to do these days?
It's a measure of the degree to which democracy is being undermined, because you can't have a democracy without informed citizens. And it's as simple as that. The other side of this is that when we talk about education, we're not just talking about public and higher education. We're talking about the fact that you have media or cultural apparatuses that now dominate the advanced countries of the world that basically are not just about entertainment. They're also about education. They're producing worldviews. They're legitimizing particular kinds of positions. They're creating particular kinds of identities. They're in a sense, enabling us to understand what the future might look like. And I think all too often progressives in the left have really ignored this. They tend to ignore the educative nature of politics. They tend to ignore how central education is to politics. Look, you have to change people's minds. You have to talk about ideas. You have to, in some way, give people the opportunity to recognize in the languages that we use their own lives, their everyday lives. So this question of education and language is so crucial to politics, and yet it's being so abused, certainly by the right, and being ignored in many ways by the left.
Well, let me ask you this, because you talk about education, and it goes back, to the, you could say, ancient Greeks and coming up with philosophy, which is the study of how to think. You study various philosophical schools, but here I am, it's the year 2016. I've never used my mind. I've never been educated, but I can go on a search engine and I can find out anything anyone's ever said in history. In other words, I don't need a mind. I don't need a brain. It's out there for me at the touch of my finger. Why should I get educated when I can access the internet? You see what I'm saying? Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you just put your finger on a great pathology regarding the information age, that people confuse information with knowledge. They confuse access with understanding. They confuse what it means to simply instantly get information without understanding the context in which it's produced, what it means, or how to study it analytically, how to be thoughtful, how to be considerate. You remember Hannah Arendt. When she talked about Nazi Germany, she said the essence of Nazi Germany was thoughtlessness. A kind of thoughtlessness took over, in a sense, the culture and the society in itself. And I think in some ways, what we're seeing with this massive flow of information, much of it is just stupid. I think what we're seeing is not only an increase in the kind of privatization that atomizes people alone with screen culture, but we're seeing a lack of dialogue. We're seeing a lack of critical engagement. We're seeing a society in which everything has to be instantaneous, pleasure, information. And so we've lost our ability to analytically put things together. How do ideas connect to other ideas? How do we understand facts? How do we put things in a context that basically reveals what they're about? Accessing information immediately doesn't solve that problem. Education solves that problem.
So does this fit into your concept of individualizing the social?
I think one of the most pernicious elements of neoliberalism is not just basically its economic tenets, which we all are familiar with. I think, but this notion that that self-interest is the essence of anybody's agency, that all problems basically have to be put at the foot of individuals, that there are no social problems, that they're all individual problems, and they're only about individual responsibility. What this does is it prevents people from being able to translate private issues into troubles, into larger systemic problems. And that is the essence of thoughtlessness. That's a form of depoliticization, Max. It basically takes people out of the political realm and it says you have to feel guilty for every problem you face, whether we're talking about inequality, the environment, crime, it's your fault. And what it does is it disappears into this disimagination machine, as I call it. This disimagination machine wipes out history, wipes out historical memory, wipes out context, and wipes out thoughtfulness.
Well, that model of blaming the victim is most often found in cases of rape. So we're saying that people are being institutionally raped.
Yes. That's a pretty strong language. It's not one I would use, Max, but I like the word depoliticization. They're being depoliticized and they're being punished.
Fair enough. Nevertheless, the quotient of anger is rising at these social movements around the world. We're seeing the rise of many of these movements. I mean, the anger fits the crime, so to speak. But I wanted to ask, kind of move on here. So the average American voter hates the government, but the elites, however, spend enormous amounts of buying these candidates who will in turn give billions in government social programs to their corporate agenda. So here you have the average guy hates America, but corporations, or the government, but the corporations love the government. And
I think there's a basic distinction that's lost there, right? And the distinction is a government for whom? If it's a government for the financial elite, of course they love it. If it's a government that works against the interests of the vast majority of people, they love it.
How did this idea that everyone should hate the government seems pretty prevalent these days, and yet America was founded on the idea of creating a fair and balanced government that serves the interests of the people.
Max, that notion that the government is evil, which is central to neoliberal ideology, right?
Yeah.
Just speaks to the social pathology of this ruling elite and their ability to lie, to create myths, to use power in their own interest. To convince the American people that the government has nothing that it can offer them. Ask them about their Social Security. We're going to eliminate your Social Security. They say, no, don't eliminate my Social Security. And then people will say, well, but that's a government program. and they don't see the contradiction.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you talk about the need to establish international movements, and I want to get into that. But first, I wanted to kind of digress a little bit. And I was thinking during the Greek crisis that started a few years ago, and it continues, why groups like Occupy Wall Street and other groups did not see common cause with the rioters in Greece, and why there wasn't an international movement, because everyone's on the same page here. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it's one of the great failings of that movement, and I do think, Max, that in many ways that's being addressed by the Black Lives Matter movement. I think that many of the black youth in the United States are now organizing and linking up with students in Chile, in France, in Greece, because we live in a new political age. Power in politics, power is now separated from politics. Politics is local. And power is global. You have a ruling elite. They don't care about states, nation states. They don't have an investment in particular spaces and landscapes. They just care about money. And I think that we don't have a politics that matches that kind of global, what I would call, form of criminal apparatus. And I think that we need a new kind of politics to address this. You can't just say that we're going to address inequality in the United Kingdom and nowhere else. You can't say we're going to just address it in the United States. I mean, these are international problems. They cross borders. And I think that young people are finally realizing that unless these movements are international, they're not going to go anywhere. They're at least not going to change a system that is as predatory and as ruthless as it currently is.
Now, you mentioned the Black Lives Matter movement there. You know, to me, it's just an extension of, you know, when I was a kid growing up, there was black power and black is beautiful. And it was part of the civil rights movement of the 60s. And then those leaders were assassinated. Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And the people who supported the movement were assassinated. The left in America was assassinated.
Right.
You know, the Black Panthers were, you know, they were out there on a left wing, you know, trying to bring against the oligopolistic force of that time, the Vietnam War. You know, that was the setup. So here we are in 2016. We've got America in a never-ending war, starting wars every single day, sending kids out to nowheresville, you know, countries around the world for no clear purpose, and there's Black Lives Matter. Someone who's very well educated yourself, do you see a bookending here? Or am I way off base?
No. I think that I don't think I think you're absolutely right in suggesting that the Black Lives Matter movement could not have existed without those earlier movements. But I think that what we don't want to forget is that each of these historical moments has its own distinctiveness. And I think that as ruthless as the government was in basically killing people, you know, COINTELPRO, the FBI program, basically what we have now is we don't just have a war on black leadership, we have a war on black people in general. And I think that actually that's even worse. I mean, I think that with the paramilitarization of the police and the breakdown of the social state and the elimination of the social contract, for all intent and purposes, you have a new kind of ruthlessness, a new kind of violence, more intense, more extreme, more quick to act, and more unaccountable.
Yeah, we're out of time, Henry Giroux. We must say goodbye.
Okay.
I'm sorry to say. We must go, but we'll have you on again soon, I hope.
I hope so, Max.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Kaiser Report with me, Max Kaiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Henry Giroux, author of Neoliberalism's War on Higher Education and many other books. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Kaiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.